Let's talk about a movie. So, last night I went and saw The Hunger Games Catching Fire. I was grateful, first of all, that it was not in 3D. I'm pretty sure you can catch it 3D in some places, but I was really glad it wasn't. I am going to take a little different tack this time. This movie and the book it is based on resonate with me very deeply. I have a whole lot of feels about it. And I think I'm going to just dive right in. I'm going to get the one thing in the whole movie that really bugged me out of the way. At first, I didn't really think about it, but when it was mentioned to me, I realized that yes, it does kind of bother me. While I understand and I appreciate that the romance was backplayed a lot, I didn't love how many scenes there were with Katniss actively kissing Gale. And it's not because I'm Team Peeta, which I am, but that's not the point. The point is not that. The point is that this is a girl who is so focused on the protection of her family that it is made what I thought was very clear in the books that she doesn't have time or energy to focus on the obviously very confusing feelings she has about the person who helped save her life in the arena and the person that she grew up knowing and trusting in her regular life, which now no longer applies. That was, I don't think it was necessary, but during the film itself didn't distract me too much. Let's talk about the fact that I cried probably a dozen times in this film. And I admit, I am a crier. Like Jude Law in The Holiday. I am a crier. A good book, a good scene, a good frickin' Guinness commercial. I'm a crier. And I cried a lot. And I thought every single performance outshone the other in every given scene. There's so much in the book that paints this dark and angry and frightened picture, and I thought that the direction that this film took captured it so beautifully, especially in the character of Joanna from District 7. She was the most blatant display of rage, and I think that her little outburst on the interview stage was probably one of my favorite parts of that. It captured the anger beautifully in a completely fearless way. Whereas Katniss is sort of, at this point in her life, stuck between a rock and a very, very big, hard place. And that is that she has this drive that I think was instilled very clearly in the first film and the first book and carried through, that she needs to protect the people she cares about, and they're the people that matters. And she'll do anything to do that. It's very clear, especially in her dealings with Haymitch, that she is not the priority, that others are, that Peeta and her family are the priority, which is something that I think is really admirable, and something that I know people took to be something that made her distant and cold in the books, but I think the Jennifer Lawrence performance makes it very real and visceral in the films. I'm going to try not to be too spoiler heavy on this, but I do want to talk about the moment in the train. In the books, when they're on the tour, they end up staying, Katniss and Peeta end up staying together at night on the train because they both have such shocking post-traumatic stress and they can't sleep without one another nearby. And a part that really resonated with me in the book was the way she always said, "Stay with me." And he always said, "Always." And I think that that is a constant that, while I don't think she takes it for granted, she doesn't understand how to appreciate until it is seemingly gone. But that part, I cried like a baby. I cried because I was so happy that the filmmakers had taken such an important piece and brought it into the film. Elizabeth Banks stepped up her performance like crazy. She was already amazing in The Hunger Games, and then in Catching Fire, the transition between, and just the space of maybe one or two short scenes of her bubbly, effervescent, dorky, adorable self on the tail end of the Victor's tour to the moment she has to do the reaping from the pool of existing victors. That whole switch was so beautiful, and I attribute that almost entirely to the performance. Like, it was written beautifully, and the character is so dynamic, even though initially you don't think so. She definitely comes into a character that is deep and has feelings in a way that you don't see people in the Capitol having feelings. You don't see anyone in the Capitol having feelings except for the very superficial feelings of want, get, have, forget. Want, get, have, forget. Like, that's their life, because everything is so superficial and fleeting, and it's all about what you possess and what's new and what's hip. And so none of these people have any feelings or dynamics. And so to see Effie, who is a product of these people, of this lifestyle, have these feelings, it's a really beautiful thing to watch. I want to talk for a minute about the arena. The arena in this book freaked me out so hard. Everything in it designed to torture you, not just to kill you in this case, whereas in the first one it seemed very clearly, we want to kill you, we want you dead, we want to see it happen, it's a game. Whereas in this, it had a much more sinister, we want to torture you, we want to drive you mad, we want to break you entirely. And then we want to watch you die. The scene in particular with the Jabberjays was incredibly painful for me in the book, because I could feel it, even though a situation like that in any capacity has never happened to me before. I have never been trapped with somebody I love being dangled in front of me like that. That's never happened. But in the book and in the film, it was so beautiful in a painful, horrifying way. The way that these victors, Katniss and Finnick in particular, were completely destroyed by these games, in particular the Jabberjays. Everything wanted you dead. The wave and the lightning and the everything and the smoke and the monkeys. Everything was scary, but everything was so much more sinister. We start to see Katniss in this one realize the lengths that everyone is going to keep her safe, but also she started to realize the depths to which she might be a pawn in a very large, very dangerous game that she has absolutely no interest in being a part of. She's starting to see the people around her die in order to make her rise up. This is especially prevalent with Cinna, who has from the beginning had her back in a way that no one in the Capitol has had her back, including Effie. And seeing him ripped away right before being thrust back into that place that destroyed her entirely only a year before was, I think, the start of a chain reaction in her brain of how many people are going to die for me. And her intense determination beginning or even continuing that it's not going to be anyone else. On a very personal note, by the end of this film, I was breathing heavily, my face was a hot mess from crying, and I was biting my lips so hard I could taste pennies. My poor boyfriend looked over at me a couple of times in the movie with what I'm sure was a worried expression on his face and a consoling pat on the arm. And the reason is because not only was this film so incredible and I think very true to the tone of the story set forth by Suzanne Collins, but I know what happens next, and I am preemptively furious and on guard and upset. I was entirely wrecked by the time the credits stopped rolling. And it's because I know what happens, and I am both looking forward to it and completely afraid. So, to end on a bit of a lighter note, because this has been kind of heavy, because this whole thing is, like I said, very important to me, because I think that good literature is so, so important, and this movie was based on one of my favorite book series, probably of all time. I think it's going to be Harry Potter, the Hunger Games trilogy, the Girl with the Dragon Tattoo trilogy, and The Secret Garden. Those are probably my top 4, and it's up there, definitely. But on a lighter note, I couldn't get enough of the soundtrack. I went home and immediately was like, I need to look up these bands, and I need to see what's on here, and I already have 2 different Pandora stations dedicated to bands from the soundtrack. So, on a super happy, objectively positive note, love the soundtrack. I hope that this was helpful or interesting or anything like that. It was mildly spoilers, not spoilers to anybody who's read the books. But please comment. I am down to discuss this at length, obviously. Later, taters.